Welcome to the Intentional Life podcast, where it's all about real strategies, real tools, and techniques to help you truly become the author of your life story.
Hello, guys. We're back with a brand new episode. This time, we are going to be talking about feminine and masculine energy. It's probably something that you're not so familiar with, so we're super excited to bring it to you.
Hi, everyone. We're really psyched to do this episode. Like Camila said, we're not sure how much you are familiar with this, but we found that when we speak to people about it, some still get a little bit confused. So we wanted to take this time to really break it down a little bit and to talk about the differences in the feminine and masculine energies.
You know that this physical world is a dualistic world, right? Which means that we can describe and experience one thing by contrasting it to its opposite. So we have night versus day, we have summer versus winter, we have the yin and the yang, or masculine and feminine energy. So they're opposites, and only by experiencing one, we can actually define the other as well. And they don't necessarily have to do anything with gender. They can be found in both genders, actually. Having said that, I personally would say that biology and hormones favor feminine energy in females and masculine energy in males. But then there's also a whole lot of conditioning, that we have received as children. And I mean, let's not even talk about our mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers and so forth. So there's still a lot of conditioning of what a woman is taught that she should be like, and what a man is taught that he should be like, and the role models that we have. But bottom line is that every person has both masculine and feminine energy in them. And it's only by achieving a healthy flow between those energies, or any contrasting energies for that matter. We kind of need this integrated approach, this holistic approach of becoming whole. And that's what this episode is about, to integrating our feminine and our masculine energy in order to become whole.
Yes. It's really interesting, because I've been sort of studying and reading about it for quite some time. And I found this topic fascinating, especially like you said, Camilla, because there's so much conditioning going on. And like the boys are told what they're supposed to be, the girls are told what they're supposed to be. Then everyone starts rebelling and it just becomes one hot mess, right? And obviously, like Camilla said, we're not just talking about the gender here, because yes, we have the feminine gender, we do have masculine gender, and also we have those individuals who don't really identify with one gender anymore. And we respect all of that, right? And what we would like to mostly focus on is, like Camilla mentioned, the balance and the play, the dance between the masculine and feminine energy within us. Because like Camilla said, we live in the universe that is based on duality and polarity. And it's almost like this connection and union between the masculine and the feminine energy is literally kind of the center of it all. I view this connection as like the ultimate, creativity power. Is like, it's almost like this connection, this polarity, the masculine and the feminine energy. And like we said, if you have the same sex relationship, sometimes it could be usually the case, in order to have the polarity, you'll have one person exhibiting more the masculine energy and the other one more the feminine energy. So we really have no judgments of what sort of relationships you are at. It's more we want to talk about the core basic energetic signature of the feminine and the masculine and how it plays out in our daily lives. And in particular, we like to talk about relationships, which is something that we can all identify with, and also the work environments, which is, again, really important topic. And before we get started, it's really important for us to give you a disclaimer that this is a massive topic and there's so much material written on it, and there are videos and teachings and all of that. So what we're going to do is literally just scratch the surface and offer you a sort of introduction to the subject, because I believe this is like an ageless topic, right? You've always had those
Totally.
sexes, right? And it's always been such an important subject. And there are so many different like angles and levels you can look at this topic from. So before we go ahead and get started, we'd like to briefly introduce the qualities of masculine and feminine energies. Do you want to start, Camilla?
Sure. So let's start with the feminine, which at its core is creative, intuitive, nurturing, caring, compassionate, and connected.
Yeah. Feminine energy is all about intuition and connection and bonding. And it's also the so-called receiving energy. It's the energy of the moon, of things that are not necessarily seen. It's about emotions. And it's the energy that allows the masculine energy to lead it, right? And when it comes to, on the opposite spectrum, the masculine energy, this is more purpose driven. It's about the mission. It's about overcoming barriers, accomplishing goals. It's about discipline, sticking to routines, something that Camilla and I talk about a lot, right? That's the masculine energy, being a leader in relationships and making things happen. So overall, it's a giving energy. So if a female is receiving energy, the male is the giving energy, and it's the energy of the sun. So think bright, strong, proactive.
Yeah. And I always view the feminine energy as sort of circular and the masculine energy as linear, which resonates in different areas of life and in different situations. But for instance, if we're talking about reaching a goal, and we all know this, right? Driving in the car with a guy, and the way we get from A to B. So the male energy, let me say, because it could obviously also be the woman, will carefully plan out how to get from A to B and just work on that until they reach their goal, while the feminine energy would more consider different options, take into account different aspects and people and opinions and things like that, and seemingly go around in circles before reaching her goal, but she also reaches it just in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. You know what? I remembered. I have to say this. I remembered, you know, Camilla, when we were studying for our coaching certificate, one of the
Uh-huh.
examples that Tony Robbins would always give, when describing the differences in the way the females operate and the males operate, he would ask us to go back to our, the beginnings, and when we would used to live in tribes, and the main task for the male would be
Oh,
to hunt,
yes,
right?
I remember that.
Right? And for the female, they were the gatherers, right? So for the male, the communication is very straightforward. They would have to go out and hunt something, right? So they would come back. It would be like, yes, they either caught something or they didn't. Whereas the females, they would go around looking for berries and nuts or whatever. So they would sometimes find something in a forest, but say the berries were not ready. So they would have to go back to the tribe and give them so much details of like, where was it? When is it going to be ready? How to get there, right? So that's why I find it so
Exactly.
so funny
And
that we.
also the connection element here, that the women really passed on the information. And, if there was a danger coming up or
Yes.
whatever, it was a woman who, because of their connectedness to one another, passed on all of this information.
Yeah.
So again, to me, like I envision this as kind of like a circle, a back and forth, and the other
Yeah.
one is a more linear. I'm just going, straight forward. And again, we really need both elements to become whole and integrated.
Absolutely. But I just love this example because when you give that to people, suddenly for men, it starts to make sense why when a female comes back and she was out for 5 minutes, she spends 15 minutes telling you what happened to her, right? And then male just cannot grasp it. It's just too much detail for them. But that's how we are programmed to communicate. Like, I went out and I
Exactly.
saw this and I thought of that. Oh, that's a beautiful color. Oh, I met her. She gained so much weight. By the way, did you did you
You know how often my husband tells me, like I can kind of, I'm telling him something, and I just want to make sure that he gets the whole picture. I want to paint the whole picture for him, because otherwise it wouldn't be, a proper presentation of the thing that I'm telling.
Yeah.
And so many times after a couple of minutes, I see he's kind of disconnected.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Are you still listening?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I heard what you're saying, but now you're just like rambling or something like that." So
I don't
it's so
think they,
cliche,
yeah,
but
I don't think they have capability of, get all the details. I do believe they just switch off after, I think what Tony used to say that even if the man is completely obsessed with you and that's the beginning of a relationship, he would only last 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, his mind is programmed to shut off and they just don't register anything you say anymore. So I find it fascinating. I've definitely noticed that in my life as well. But
And
so,
unfortunately, we're two women. Well, we're talking a bit from the feminine now,
right, we are.
a male representing his part. So we don't want to sound like it's bashing at all, but it's just, I
No.
think women will be able to resonate. And
Yeah, definitely. We love our men. Absolutely. It's just really interesting to study those differences in communication, right? And,
Mhm.
like it's important just when you know the differences, you can communicate to your man and say, look, this is just something I do. Like, I don't need you to solve anything, right? Because that's how man is programmed. When you share something with them, they're constantly looking for a problem and they want to give you a solution. That's how they are. That's how they operate. Whereas for us, we
Mhm.
just need a friendly ear. We're like, look, we just want to share what happened, right? So definitely interesting. And so going back to the feminine and masculine energies and how they play out, they can, within us we have both masculine and feminine, and they can sort of dance and change in different phases, situations, and even areas of our lives. For instance, a female can be seen as more masculine in the business setting and take on masculine qualities, but when she's with her partner, she becomes softer and more caring and gentler and steps into her feminine more. And this amazing, really fascinating phenomenon that we see nowadays, and I guess a lot of you guys will have noticed that as well, is that women started to embrace more and more the masculine qualities, and men started to take on more feminine energy by getting
Mhm.
a little softer, being less decisive, less willing to take control and ownership or make decisions, which is a completely masculine energy. And I feel like a lot of the relationships consequently end up suffering because the polarity then either is completely lost, because when you say, for instance, have a woman who is very masculine and a male who's masculine, there's no polarity. Like, the sexual attraction just is gone. Or
Mhm.
the polarity becomes unhealthy because, say, for instance, then you have like a masculine woman and she's with a feminine man. So polarity is still there, but it's almost like it switched places. It's not the healthiest thing that you could have. And of course, we shift, cannot be taken out of context, because to some extent, I feel like for many, many years, and we're going to touch on that a bit later, for many years, man, to some extent, and I know men will argue with that, so I'm trying to tread lightly on this. To some extent, women were a little bit suppressed and we didn't have as much power and as much say, right, in the way we want to lead our lives. So it's almost like now that we finally have the rights to do whatever we want, say whatever we want, it's almost like we try to overcompensate for it, for the
Mhm.
loss of power. And have you noticed that, Camilla? Is that something that you see as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's, it's fair to say that women were totally suppressed and are still in many parts of the world, unfortunately.
Mm,
But yeah, and there is a lot of conditioning. So I do believe that in the past, women were conditioned to be too feminine and the males were conditioned to be too masculine. Boys don't cry
mm-hmm,
and you have to be the sole provider of the family, and all of this responsibility that is also a very heavy burden on the men. And so I do believe that leads to just being unbalanced and to suffering, and also having difficulties to relate to others because you just have too much of one energy and too less flow between both of them.
mm-hmm,
And as you touched on in about relationships, so being a relationship coach, I deal with this a lot. In order to have attraction, we need to have polarity, like Vilma said. Polarity is basically a certain dynamic in our relationship. So just think of trying to match two magnets, right? When you take two magnets and the opposite poles touch, they will be strongly pulled towards each other. It's like, woo, you can't do anything about it,
mm,
right? But when the same poles touch, they will push each other away because it's
mm,
just too much of the same thing. So even though it might be our commonalities that bring us together in the first place, as a couple, like our shared interests and our preferences and so forth. It's actually our polarity, so the difference between our energies, that creates the physical and sexual attraction. And one way to achieve that is through having a beautifully balanced dance between the masculine and the feminine energies. Now, as I said before, these are not restricted to their matching gender, and we all have both energies within us. And yet, I think that we can learn so much from each other in this regard in an attempt to become more whole. So, for instance, the feminine energy can learn from the masculine to set better boundaries, to put herself first and her needs first, to actually first of all become clear on her needs. Because I do think many women, or at least the feminine energy, sometimes isn't as clear and as logical and as straightforward as the male is.
Mm,
um, and also take an action. Like Vilma mentioned, the feminine energy can be indecisive and can be, slow to take a step. So that would be masculine. Take action. Do something about what's bothering you, for instance. And also, another very important thing I believe is that the feminine energy becomes very attached, which is
mm,
beautiful in human relationships and in friendships. The way girlfriends, lean on each other and call on one another. To me, that's really beautiful. But it can kind of cloud our vision. And if we're so attached to people and to things, it will distance ourselves from our purpose and our inner truth.
mm,
So we can really learn so much from each other. I do think that unfortunately, many of us have become quite disconnected. Wilma mentioned that we have become quite disconnected to our masculine and or feminine energies. So traditionally, like we said, females have been conditioned to be overly feminine and males to be overly masculine, which really leads to this unhealthy codependency in a relationship instead of a well-rounded flowing interaction between the sexes where we actually inspire and complement each other. So nowadays, where gender equality is an issue, many women have felt forced to adopt a very masculine energy in the workplace, right? So in turn, they demand a more feminine energy for their partners at home, and maybe taking care of the house and the kids. Those have become shared tasks, which is great, and it's important. But my personal opinion, also as a boy's mom, is that I think it's becoming really hard for men in this day and age to find their role as the modern male,
mm,
because there's so much focus on empowering the women, which I love, and it's long overdue, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, my worry is that it makes it difficult for today's men to find their place,
right.
because it's like if they're too masculine, then they're macho and old fashioned. But if they're too feminine, they may risk losing their essence and their polarity, and also, let's be honest, the respect of their female partner a lot of times. Do you resonate with this, Wilma? What do you think of this?
Oh, absolutely. I really, listening to you, I was just like, well, I mean, I can relate to that, right? When, we have, as females, we have so much expectation, and I'm definitely guilty of that. So much expectation of a man and what he's supposed to be for us. And at the same time,
Mhm.
we do so much these days that the man at the end of the day may end up being confused and be like, so where do I step in? Because now you earn your money, now you're so independent. Now you can, fix things at home. Where do I stand in? And then it's almost like they become this doormat energy that they don't even know where to put. And so then, like, I mean, it is true. And then what they end up doing to save it is either spend more times with with the friends, or they become like with all due respect, like, passive, just watching TV and not wanting to help out at home. Right. So that's definitely a huge energy and a huge
Which
problem
is
these
like,
days.
actually, this is like passive aggressive, right?
It is passive aggressive. Like, you don't need me, fine.
Yeah. So you're not gonna have my help.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I really, at the same time, like, I don't think we should completely blame them either. right?
No.
So we can't just like, we can't just, even though I love my girlfriends and I will always support them when they come and they complain about their men, at the same time we have to kind of take some responsibility as well.
Oh,
And
yes.
there's there's actually like this concept called castration dynamic, and Camilla and I, we spoke about it just before recording, which I find fascinating. I kind of always felt this is happening, but once I researched a little bit, I realized that's becoming an issue, and that's to do with how the mothers bring their sons up. And a very controversial controversial name for it, castration dynamic, but basically what happens is, because like I mentioned before and Camilla mentioned, the females were stripped out of their rights to be like full blown independent human being for so many centuries. Really, what they tend to do now, or at least the past generation, maybe it's changing now, but what they try to do is almost like they bringing their sons up, they try to strip them off of their masculinity. And because they were suffering from the men in their lives, they wanted to make their sons less dangerous and make them completely dependent on their mothers so that they could feel more safe in the world in general. And basically all of this is I don't think they did that on purpose. I think this is a very subconscious process, because as a female, all of the relationship coaches, Camilla, probably you can say that as well. In a relationship, a female will, her number one need is for safety, that of physical safety and that of emotional safety. So if she does not feel safe and she does not have control over the men in their lives, the fathers who would wed them with men they did not like, the husband who was more like conservative, macho kind of type, they had no control. They did not feel safe. So the only control they had was at homes, right? Because they were left at home. They had, it was kind of their dominion where they had, power over whatever was happening there. So that's where they sort of started exercising their control and started to making their sons, well, I would say like a little bit less masculine, right?
I know several cases actually. This totally rings a bell. So I was like, oh my God, there's a word for it. It makes so much sense. And
Right.
the ladies listening, I'm sure you've already all experienced this type of guy that, or it might even be your partner. Let's be honest. There are so many that are seemingly so dependent on their mother. And it's so unmasculine, that he's like
Right.
still as a grown man so dependent on his mom and attached to her. And really, I mean, these are dynamics created in childhood from very early on. So your partner, if that was him, he was just an innocent child, and his mother, most probably or definitely, without wanting to cause any harm, but out of this need to connect with someone so deeply, and maybe she could not do that with her husband, or
Yes.
maybe the husband wasn't in the picture. So she used her male child to fill that space and you know kind of, yeah, attached to him in this way. And yeah, I guess with time it is possible for the guy to kind of find his place as, first of all, an independent human adult being, and second of all, the partner of a new woman. So I do think that time can help, and also clear communication, but just keep in mind that it wasn't his fault that this occurred in the first place.
Yeah. So that's firstly finding, before setting off and being upset with them, is finding some compassion to see like, look, this is what happened. There's no one really to blame, because the mothers were doing what the best that they could do as well, what they fought, right? Unconsciously, subconsciously serving and meeting their own needs through their sons, right? And at the same time, it does require a really wise and patient woman. And I know I've heard of those examples where females wives get so upset with their husbands, because then imagine this, then you don't feel safe. You feel like, what if he prioritizes his mother's needs above yours, right? And then you feel like, so hold on, we have this new family, and that I almost feel like it's like a relationship with three people, right? So it's a really sensitive topic, and I think like, actually, Camilla, that's something people should talk more of. I don't know. I haven't really researched it much, much more than this, but I wonder if there's, almost, I think women should need some support groups
Yeah.
how to deal with such a sensitive issue, because you don't want to disrespect the mother either, right? Because if you disrespect that, the son or your husband will be upset again, right? So how do you
Mm,
find that healthy balance?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just reiterating what you said before, it's not about blaming. It's never about blaming. Blaming doesn't get us anywhere. Even if we have reason to blame someone else or something else for anything happening in our life, that doesn't get us anywhere. So, really, it's about having more compassion, be it for the other sex or the other energy or the other person in general, more compassion and also more wisdom in knowing how to react from a higher place, from a higher self place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's always the answer, isn't it? Basically, when I was talking about mothers and how they try to take some sort of exercise, some sort of control over their lives by implementing this unhealthy dynamics, I see that a lot also of women in workplaces doing the same. And it's almost like they try to step into the masculine more. And I have experienced that firsthand, coming firstly from the corporate world, where qualities like assertiveness and decision making, being straight to the point, is really celebrated and rewarded. So it's almost like females, they don't have any other choice, but if they want to be successful at work, they're expected to take on these qualities. And I especially let alone corporate, I especially experienced that when I was working with the military. I did that for 3 years, so I was surrounded by female military officers. And let me tell you, Camilla, it was like a lab for me. Sometimes I would just sit there observing their behavior. I could not believe. Looked like a woman, her voice was of the female, but then everything else was like so masculine about that. I would get confused. Look, it's like military is so hierarchical. It's a hierarchical structure.
It's a
So
masculine
it's
structure.
very masculine structure. You have to be very, very strong in order to like gain the respect of other military officers, right? And so yeah, like I believe they had no choice. I believe they believe that that's what they need to be. And like I said, I would just get so confused, like man woman, like look like a woman, doesn't quack like a woman, like what's going on, right? And I was like, wow, this is so sad. And then I always secretly wondered, because a few officers were my bosses, so I wasn't really close to them, but I was like wondering, what are they like at home, right? And do they manage to switch to the feminine energy to make sure that the balance is kept? But then from what I've heard, like the most masculine one, she was really higher up. I don't remember what her title was, but she said, basically people said that her husband was very sort of feminine. So I would assume then that actually the balance was not tipped off at home either, where she continued to stay in her masculine role. And I was like, well, I wonder how that is going, like what sort of dynamic that is. But like I said, when it comes to workplaces nowadays, we just literally are expected to be like that. This is what is rewarded. And at the same time, I believe that we can actually balance out the feminine and the masculine energies at work. So, for instance, one of the ways I personally do that is, like we said, planning, scheduling. But at this point, you guys all know I'm obsessed with that, right? So planning, scheduling, sticking to routines is very, very masculine. Discipline is very masculine energy, right? So because I like to do that, I tend to be aware now not to overdo it with my masculine, because when I step into it, I just become like I don't feel as much. I cannot relate to people as much when I step into that masculine energy. So then what I did in order to introduce the more feminine energy is basically I plan my day sometimes. And then what I do is I turn my intuition on and I look at the plan of my day. And what I do is I allow myself at the course of the day switch things up. So at the end of the day, I still make sure I get things done that I planned. But what I do is I allow my female to play and be a little bit more creative in choosing what she feels like doing the most. And we always have the intuition. So say, for instance, sometimes I think, okay, so from 9 to 11, I'm going to do whatever I need to work on, like whatever, write a blog post. And then the 9 comes and I feel like, oh, actually, I had planned to go to the city and get a few things in the afternoon, but I actually feel like doing it now. It just feels good. It just feels right. So I switch things up and then I go to
That's
the city,
great.
right? And then in the afternoon, guess what? I actually usually feel like writing. So our intuition is so smart. And I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes if we get too rigid and just step into the masculine, it gets really boring and really dry. And I think a lot of us, we hate being bored. I hate being bored,
Oh,
right?
I absolutely loathe being bored. But as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, see, I need to step in more into more of my masculine when it comes to work because I'm too, okay, what feels good to me now to do out of my
Mm,
tasks? And yeah, I think, yeah, I need to be more masculine in the
yeah.
whole scheduling
Right. So, I
part.
mean, yeah, scheduling part, that's the thing. Like, the most important thing, you stay in the range of the day, right? So, I don't just be
Mhm.
like, oh, I hadn't planned that I want to go and get my haircut, but like, I just feel like doing it. So, like, I don't usually allow myself to do it. So, I'll be like, look, this is your playground, is what you planned for the day. This is the toys that you can play with today, right?
I like that metaphor.
Yeah, like these are the
Makes
toys.
work sounds like so much fun.
It does, doesn't it? Right? So, like, I'd be like, look, this is the toys. You can play with it as much as you want. And then it's also like what's important for me. I feed the child in me because, we're so disconnected from the inner child as well. Right? We
Mhm.
don't feed his needs. We don't play enough. So for me, that's also a way to play with my inner child. Be like, look, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. And then my feminine as well. So I love this method. Doesn't always work for everyone, works for me, but just like with everything else, you need to try and test and see what could make sense for your life and your personality type. Another example, which I absolutely love, is the owner and the founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely. I don't know, Camilla, have we spoken about her? Because I'm really like,
No.
I'm girl crushing so bad on that woman. I think a lot of us do. She's like a billionaire at this point. I think she's considered the richest woman in the world. Because
Wow.
obviously Spanx is a hugely successful product.
Mhm.
And basically, what she did, she started her business when she was 28. Up until then, she was selling copy machines door to door, right? And then at some point, she was like, "Look, I can't do this anymore. It's not making me happy. What I want to do is create something that would like make the life of millions of people's better." And then at some point, I think she was watching Oprah, and then she had the idea of the first Spanx product, right? And at that point in time, she was like, she had no business of going into business. She didn't have any contacts. She had no idea how to create a product. She had no idea how to manufacture it. She had no business basics at all, apart from probably good selling skills, right? Which is a big part of the business, but still.
Mhm.
And what she did, she goes like, when then people ask her what's her greatest, secret to success, she goes like, my greatest secret to success is that I stuck to my nature and I did not do business in a conventional way, right?
Mhm.
What was important for me is what I see now. She nurtured the feminine qualities, which she was never mean to
Yeah.
people. She would go into business deals or business negotiations, and she would still be feminine and girly. And she goes like, there was like this business party once, and I went in there, and I was probably the only woman in there, and there's all fancy men. And one of them, he sat me down and he started telling to me, this is not how you do business. You're not going to be successful if you stay like this crazy girly, friendly to everyone. Like, this is not how it's done, right? And then she goes like,
Mhm.
and then I went to the bathroom and I cried for the rest of the night. And then,
Oh.
yeah, I know, like, it's breaking my heart. She's such a sweetheart. And then she goes like, I went back home and I promised myself that, you know, I will just do business in the way that I want to do business, and I will stay true to my values, which is be nice to people, be feminine, be crazy. Because she's very funny as well. She goes like, I'm not going to become like a man in order to be successful. It's not worth it, right? And she stuck to that up until now. If you check her out, she's still really, she's crazy, right? And that's, I was like, I love that, because she
Yeah.
was playing in the masculine world, but she stuck to her feminine qualities. And I'm like, we need more of that.
That's beautiful. And there is this saying that's probably, when I heard it, it's probably what impacted me the most in so many ways. And it's everything seems impossible until it's done.
Hmm.
Well, not everything, but some things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. You can do business as a feminine woman. You can be a politician as a feminine woman.
Mm-hmm.
Can, so many different things. Just don't think that, oh, this could never, I could never be like that. I could never do that. It's not true. It's just that we need one person to break the ice and to take that step, and then others will be able to follow.
Yeah, and that comes really ties in beautifully with intention, right? Not
Mhm.
living life on autopilot and questioning yourself.
Exactly.
What do you want to represent? What do you feel the
And
best at?
blaming.
Absolutely. Yeah, and be brave enough and just do whatever you feel like doing. So, for instance, for me, what I realized is that I love being feminine, right? For me, it's really, really interesting to be feminine. And if you guys feel like you want to exercise the feminine energy more, there are so many things that are considered, feminine that you could introduce in your life. For instance, dancing, right?
Mm.
Dancing, feeling the rhythm. There are a lot of like dance classes where all you do is you gather up. I don't know if it's popular over there, Camilla, but you gather up, you play some music, you close your eyes, and you just dance in a group. Or like get pampered, do some, get a facial, go to a spa. Also, creativity is feminine. You can paint, you can knit, right? You can
Mm.
cook, but like with love, like really enjoy it, not just because you have to, but like, try out a new recipe. Even very cliche things like wearing a dress. When I wear a dress, I do feel more feminine. You know what?
Definitely.
Right? I even feel like people react to you differently. Men react to you differently. I'm not talking about like everyone is hitting on you, but it's just that, they sort of, you allow them to be more masculine. People open the door more to me when I'm wearing a flowy dress, for instance.
Mhm.
I've noticed that. Wear your favorite perfume, right? If you like, put on makeup on. Little
Mhm.
things like that. Do you have anything
Mhm.
to add, Camilla?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So just things that nurture your feminine essence. And in contrast, if you're a guy listening and you would like to become masculine, you could, do more sportive activities, especially things like lifting weights or some, heavy masculine sport. I remember also in our course, Tony Robbins had one guy come up on stage who was very much in his feminine, and
Mm.
he had him roar like a lion.
Oh, yeah.
At first, it was like, "Rah!" And like, oh, come on, you can do better than that. Like, rah! In the end, he was like, felt so good. Like you could see in the audience and everyone is like, oh wow, I feel you now. I feel your masculine energy now. And that's not like it might sound stupid. It's not that men, are those cave animal types. No, but it's just, and it's also not that women are just the superficial, oh, I'm going to pamper myself and get a
Mm-hmm.
mani pedi to be more feminine. It's not about that. It's just about tapping into your essence, because again, we want, what we want is to become whole as a
Mm-hmm.
person, in our relationship, in our work relationships. We just want to be, we need to be whole in order to get the full spectrum and the best experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And just doing something physical, just anything physical. As you guys,
Mhm.
majority of you know, like I'm renovating my flat and then I have, those builders who work there. And you know what? Everything about their essence, the way they talk, the way they move is so masculine because I think that
Mhm.
majority of the day they do actually end up, doing physical work. And I'm not saying that people should switch careers and become a builder, right? Not at all. It's just that, just doing something physical, I think is part of like the masculine nature. It's almost
Yeah.
like it supports, it feeds the masculinity within them when they do something physical. And let me tell you, when a man is fixing something, your man is fixing something at home, that's probably one of the sexiest things he can do. Like at least for
Mhm.
me, right? Like
True.
that that is super sexy. So, just saying, if there are any men listening, hey, you know what to do. And yeah, and just to wrap the things up, what we wanted to leave you with is an example. So basically, some years ago, I studied, the Vedic tradition. I'm not sure how I pronounce it in English. And these are Vedas, are these ancient Indian spiritual texts. But what they contain is not only information about spirituality, but also about everyday life. And especially, they focus a lot on gender roles. And while some of the advice that they give is I would agree it's a little outdated, right? You can't just take it out of the context because it was different timing back then. But they do talk a lot about feminine and masculine energy. And there was a really, really great reminder that's basically underlying advice that you see everywhere in that text is that in spite of your gender, firstly, what we need to do is to take control over our own energy way before we start expecting our partner or the other person to be less or more of something, right? So again, it's not about pointing finger at someone and be like, well, he's not doing that. So if you feel like, say, for instance, your man is not masculine, not proactive, not decisive enough, or does not take enough decisions, ask yourself, do you embody the feminine energy? Do you make space for your man to step into his divine masculine? Because I see a lot of women, and it's very common where I come from like, the Baltic states, the Eastern Europe. The women, they basically, because they sort of lost the hope that their man would change, what they do is they take over pretty much what we call all corners of their house. They end up doing everything, taking on everything, cooking, earning money, looking after children, planning the vacations. Literally, they take it all on their own shoulders. And then what happens is that, they become really, really, first of all, tired physically. Second of all, they don't feel like they're being supported in their life, right? And then they become resentful. And guess what? The man feels that. But were you patient enough to give him a chance to step into his masculine role? Did you kindly ask him? Because what the Vedas say that the female is 8 times more psychically strong. She's stronger than a male, right? And she has to be really careful with the way she approaches the man. The man always wants to be, firstly, to be admired and respected. And if the man feels like he is lacking that respect and admiration from the female, that's a bit of a game over. Like, he just doesn't feel like his main need in a relationship is being met, right? So again, it's about firstly looking at our own garden, and like I say, we take the weeds out of your own garden before looking at the neighbor's garden and be like, well, he's not been working. So it's about you, always about you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said, do you create enough space for
Mm-hmm.
your man to be masculine? I think that's really the key. Are you creating that space, or are you already, impatiently anticipating certain action because you're thinking, oh, he's not gonna ever pick up the socks, or he's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna take out the trash, so I'll just do it. It's very human and understandable, but maybe you can find different ways to be like, okay, if he's not doing it yet, I'm just going to let it go until he's ready to. Or when he does something that, you do consider very masculine, immediately, call on it, compliment him on it.
Mm.
Um, Men like admiration. That's not a cliche. There are so many studies on that. It's true. They want to feel admired and looked up to a little bit. And, you know, do you remember this movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
I do. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I'll always remember how the mom said, men are the head of the family, but the women are the neck, and the
Mm-hmm.
neck turns the head whichever way she wants.
Yeah.
So really, we don't want to, make you think that you need to have this super traditional feminine versus masculine um, role roles in your relationship, but just know how to step into your feminine power while still allowing your man to have his masculine power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also to add to that, that's really, really important point, which maybe we should do an episode on, is the communication strategies. So if the bin is not taking out, do you sit there silently boiling over inside, but have you asked your man to take the bin out? Because guess what? Most of the times they don't know. They're not being mean, they're not being passive aggressive. It's not common sense for them that something needs to be done sometimes, right? So if you be
Or
like,
you've taught them that you'll do it
all
anyway.
right,
So
or
they're like,
that.
oh. She's gonna do it anyway at
Right.
some point.
And it's not a big deal for them. It's not disrespectful for them. If they seen you do it all the time, they just assume you're gonna do it. It's not like this for them. It's just, oh, of course, like she always does it. So would I bother? I'm gonna sit and read, an article or, whatever, scroll on my phone. But if you be like, honey, could you please take the rubbish out, right? Could you take the bins out? Of course they're going to do it. They're not going to say no to you. Or they're going to say, yes, when I'm finished with something, I'm going to do it. And,
Yeah.
also the way you phrase it, like that's just something we laugh about with my friends. Don't say like, could you, what was it? When you have time, would you feel like, because in Lithuanian we have like, would you feel like taking it out? Don't say it like that. Just say, please take it out. Because men are very straightforward. Okay, I'm talking like, do you think we're bashing men? I don't. I think it's just different communication style. They are much
Yeah,
more
and we have to
straightforward.
simplify, and
Yeah.
as we always reiterated, it's about the wholeness and the integration of both and making
Yeah.
space for both.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to learning from the masculine energy in my life, I could definitely, learn to set better boundaries for myself and to put myself first, to voice my needs in a more direct and unapologetic manner, which would be a masculine energy. That's what we just talked about, right? A
Mm.
lot of times we're just not this direct in our communication and think that everyone else should do the guesswork.
Yes, yes, amen to that. I think for me, I would want to. That's what Camilla and I we laughed before recording because we have different lessons to learn. So for Camilla, she feels like she could learn a little bit from the masculine, and for me, I feel like because look, I'm an Aries, and my planet, if anyone is into astrology, is Mars, and Mars is a planet of war. So it's very masculine in its nature. So I have quite a lot of that strong masculine energy. So for me, what I do is I love to study feminine and I love like observing, like really nurturing, women or women who are like softer or women who like sometimes I look at the way women walk and I like observe them. I like, oh, she's so feminine. It looks so good. So for me, or like Camilla, sometimes I hear her speak to her children and she becomes like really, really nurturing and soft. I'm like, oh wow, that's just really, really interesting. Like, I wish I had more of that. So for me, it's the opposite spectrum where I study the feminine energy and I really love it. And yeah, to wrap things up, what I also wanted, if you guys feel like this topic is resonating with you or you would like to learn more about it, because like we said, it's a huge, huge subject, there's a great resource we'd like to recommend you for both men and women. It's a book by David Data, and he's been studying masculinity, sacred masculinity for many, many years. And he's got a great book called The Way of the Superior Man. We're going to add that in the notes of the episode so you can check it out. And basically, he talks a lot about what masculine energy is about, how it translates into everyday action, but also he analyzes the feminine. And, for me, even reading that book, allowed me to gain more respect for the masculine and what they're going through. B, allowed me to understand myself better because he talks a lot about what the subconscious behavior that the female takes over. Like, for instance, we test our men without even realizing that, right? So that is really, really, really beautifully put into that book. So if you guys into that, please, please check it out. Yeah, and let us know if this is something that you deal with in your everyday life. If you have any questions, if you have stories to share, we love stories. So please,
Where
please
are
feel free.
you too much in your feminine or too much in your masculine?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be super interesting just for you to become so self-aware and conscious to realize, oh, I need a dash of masculinity in here, or I need a dash of feminine energy in there. So definitely let us know. Drop us a comment or an email. We're super excited to be back with you in 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for sending us lovely messages. We love hearing from you, and we'll speak to you
Yes.
soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe, share, and comment, and do let us know how our tips are working out for you. You can find our websites below, and we'd love to virtually meet you there.